So 3 Fridays ago, my boyfriend of almost 2 years told me he had a late meeting with his project team and probably wouldn't be done until after 10. That was the last time I believed anything that came out of his mouth. I'm getting ahead of myself, though. His name is Keith. We'd been together since fall of 2023, moved in together last March into this duplex in Wichita that his cousin owns. The rent is cheap because the place is kind of rough. The kitchen faucet has this slow drip that drives me insane at night. The walls between units are so thin you can hear the couple next door watching their game shows every evening. And the driveway is shared, so I always had to park behind Keith's truck and move my car whenever he needed to leave first. That last part matters later. I need to back up and explain what the Fridays looked like before everything went sideways. Keith started saying he had these Friday evening work obligations around early January. He works in some corporate office park near the turnpike. I've dropped him off there a few times, but honestly, I never cared enough to understand exactly what his team does. He told me his department got assigned to some long-term rollout, and the team leads wanted everyone staying late on Fridays to hit deadlines. Cool. Fine. I work long hours too, so I wasn't about to be that girlfriend who throws a fit about overtime. January, February, most of March. Every Friday, he'd text me around 4:30 saying he'd be late, don't wait up. He'd grab food on the way home. Sometimes he wouldn't walk through the door until 11:30. I never questioned it because honestly, I liked having Friday nights to myself. I'd make whatever I wanted for dinner, watch my shows without him complaining about the volume, talk on the phone with my mom for 2 hours. It was kinda nice. But here's the thing that started bugging me. Keith is not a generous person. Like, he's not cheap exactly, but he counts every dollar. Split everything down the middle type. We literally have a shared spreadsheet for groceries and household stuff. If I bought toilet paper 2 times in a row, he'd bring it up. That's just how he is, and I accepted it because whatever, at least he's consistent about it. But starting around February, he had cash on him constantly. Not like huge amounts, but he'd have 20s and 10s in his wallet when usually he's strictly debit card only. I noticed because one time I asked him to grab milk on his way home and he said he didn't have his card on him. Just cash. Keith always has his debit card. It lives in his phone case. I filed that away and kept it moving. Then there was the gym thing. Keith goes to the gym maybe twice a week, has for years, nothing crazy. But around the same time the Friday stuff started, he bumped it up to 4, sometimes 5 days a week. New protein powder showed up in the cabinet. Started doing his laundry separately, which he'd never done before. And yeah, I know how that sounds now, but at the time I told myself he just didn't want his sweaty gym clothes sitting with the regular stuff. Which, like, okay, sure, Keith. My mom noticed something was off before I did. She came over one Sunday in February to help me deep clean the duplex. The landlord, Keith's cousin Leonard, was supposed to be coming by for some inspection that never actually happened. She was wiping down the bathroom counter and she asked me why there were 2 different body washes in the shower. I told her one was mine and one was Keith's. She picked up the second one and said this smells like something a teenage girl would buy at Bath & Body Works. I looked at it and it was this coconut vanilla thing I'd never seen before. I told my mom maybe Keith just wanted to try something new. She gave me this look. You know, the look. The one where your mom doesn't say anything but her face says everything. She just put the bottle down and moved on to scrubbing the tub. I should have pressed harder. I know that. But I was in that headspace where you tell yourself you're being paranoid and you don't want to be the crazy jealous girlfriend because that's embarrassing. And what if you're wrong and then you've created this whole problem out of nothing? So I let it go. Okay, so then. The Saturday that changed everything. March 22nd. I remember the exact date because it was the morning after Keith told me he'd be at work until at least midnight for some end-of-quarter crunch. I woke up around 9, made coffee, sat on the couch scrolling my phone. I follow Keith's coworker Vince on Instagram because Vince's girlfriend Tabitha and I had met a couple times at work events, and she's cool. Tabitha posted an Instagram story. I almost swiped past it. It was a reel from some rooftop bar downtown, not even a place I recognized, some spot with string lights and those tall cocktail tables. The camera panned across and there was Keith, my Keith, sitting at a high-top table with a girl I'd never seen before. She was literally feeding him a forkful of cake and her other hand was flat on his chest. His arm was around her waist. They looked comfortable. Not like 2 people who just met. Not like colleagues being friendly. Comfortable like they'd done this 100 times. Tabitha's caption said, "Double date nights hit different." I watched that story probably 15 times. I screenshot it. I screen recorded it. I zoomed in on the girl's hand on his chest. I zoomed in on his face. He was smiling. Like full teeth out happy. The way he used to smile at me when we first started dating, and he was actually trying. I texted him the screenshot. No words, just the image. 3 minutes. He read it in 3 minutes, and I know because I was staring at the screen. Then the typing dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. He told me that the girl was Vince's girlfriend's sister, and that the four of them went out for Vince's birthday. He said I was embarrassing myself with this jealous behavior, and that he doesn't appreciate being accused of something over one picture. He said this is exactly why he doesn't invite me to work stuff anymore, because I make everything about me. I was sitting on our couch in his oversized Wichita State hoodie that I'd stolen from him like a year ago, and this man was telling me that I was the problem, that I was being jealous, that I was embarrassing myself, while a girl I'd never heard of was feeding him cake with her hand on his body. I didn't respond, not because I was being mature about it, but because I was so angry I knew if I typed anything right, then it would be something I couldn't take back. And I wanted to be smart about this. I needed to be smart about this. So I called Tabitha. Okay, wait, I forgot to mention. I had Tabitha's number because she'd texted me back in November, asking if I wanted to split a ride to Keith's office holiday party. We weren't besties, but we were friendly enough to have each other's numbers. I called her. She picked up on the second ring, sounded like she'd just woken up. I told her I saw her Instagram story and asked who the girl with Keith was. And this is the part where it went from bad to oh no. Tabitha got real quiet. Not like hesitant quiet, more like confused. She asked me what I meant, like she didn't understand the question. I said the girl in the story, the one feeding Keith cake, who is she? Tabitha said that's Brianna. I asked who's Brianna. She said Keith's girlfriend. I didn't even process it at first. I told Tabitha that I'm Keith's girlfriend. Tabitha started laughing. Not mean laughing, but like nervous, confused laughing. And then she stopped and said, "Wait, are you serious?" I said, "Dead serious, we live together." She said, "Oh my God." According to Tabitha, Keith had been bringing Brianna around since late January. Every Friday. The whole friend group, Vince, Tabitha, a couple other people from Keith's office, they all thought Keith and Brianna were together. Like officially together. Keith apparently told Vince he'd broken up with me back in December and started seeing Brianna in January. He told everyone I'd moved out. I was literally sitting in our shared duplex wearing his hoodie. Tabitha said she felt terrible and she genuinely seemed upset. She said Brianna had been at every Friday hangout for months. She said Brianna knew everyone's names, had inside jokes with the group, had met Vince's parents when they visited last month. This wasn't some random hookup on the side. Keith had built an entire second relationship and told everyone his first one was over. I asked Tabitha what Brianna looked like, what she did, how old she was. Tabitha didn't know much. Said she was maybe 23 or 24, pretty, had long dark hair, seemed sweet. She said Brianna always seemed really into Keith, always touching him, always sitting close. She said Keith seemed happy with her, like genuinely happy. And then she caught herself and apologized for saying that. I told Tabitha I needed to go. She asked if I was okay, and I told her I didn't know yet. She said she was going to call Vince. Here's where my brain switched from shock to strategy. Keith wasn't coming home until at least noon on Saturdays after his late work nights. I now realized he was probably staying at Brianna's place. I had hours. I sat at our wobbly kitchen table with my coffee going cold, and I started thinking about what I actually wanted to do. Because here's what I knew about Keith that he probably forgot I knew. Back in October, Keith had been stressed about something at work. He came home one day and was ranting about his boss Sean and how Sean had it out for him. He told me Sean had already put him on some kind of informal warning for calling out too many Mondays. Keith has a thing about Mondays. He'd call out at least once a month, claiming he was sick. Keith told me that Sean said one more issue and it would go to HR and become a formal thing. Keith was sweating it because apparently his position was already being looked at for some restructuring and he couldn't afford any marks against him. I also knew that Keith had been using company time and resources for personal stuff. Not like major stuff, but he'd told me stories. Using the office printer to print concert tickets, taking supply closet stuff home, clocking in early from the parking lot before he actually walked in. Small stuff that nobody cares about until somebody wants to care about it. And I knew he'd been telling his boss he was staying late on Fridays for the project. If he was actually at a rooftop bar every Friday night, that meant he was either leaving early or lying on his timesheets. I want to be clear about something. I wasn't trying to ruin his life. I was trying to make sure he couldn't just waltz back in here and spin some story about how I was overreacting. I wanted there to be consequences that he couldn't talk his way out of. Keith is the kind of person who can explain away anything if you give him enough room. He could convince you it was raining on a sunny day if you let him keep talking. I needed to cut that off. So I did something. And before you guys come at me, I know it was aggressive. I know some people would say it crossed a line. But this man looked me in my face for 3 months and lied every single Friday. And then called me embarrassing when I caught him. So yeah, I did what I did, but I'm not going to tell you what I did yet because honestly this post is already way too long. And the thing that happened after is actually the more insane part. What Keith did when he found out. What Brianna did. What his family did. What my family did. Because oh yeah, my dad got involved. My dad, Ray, is not the type of man who lets things go quietly. And when he found out what Keith had been doing, he drove to Wichita from Salina, which is about 90 minutes, and showed up at the duplex on a Tuesday night, unannounced, looking like he wanted to put Keith through a wall. And Leonard, Keith's cousin who owns the duplex, he got dragged into it too because it turns out Keith had been telling Leonard a completely different story about our relationship to keep the cheap rent situation going. That whole thing blew up in a way I genuinely did not expect. I'll post the update with everything. What I did, Keith's meltdown phone call, the one from the title where he was screaming about HR, what happened when he finally came back to the duplex, and the Brianna situation, which honestly took a turn I still can't believe. Anyway, that's where I'm at right now. Sorry this is so long. If you read all this, you're a real one. I'll update soon because trust me, the second half is where it gets wild. Oh, and before anyone asks, yes, I still have the screenshot. Yes, I still have the screen recording. And yes, Tabitha confirmed everything in writing because that girl is thorough and I love her for it. Update coming soon. I just need to organize my thoughts because a lot happened in like 4 days, and I want to make sure I tell it right. Okay, so I've been sitting with this, and the thing I keep coming back to is these men really think we're stupid. Like, genuinely. He looked at her every single day and figured she'd never put it together. That's the part that makes me want to throw my phone across the room. The cheating is bad, but the way he was so confident she was too dumb to catch on, that's what gets me. And I'm sorry, but the cheap thing is sending me. The man has a spreadsheet. A whole spreadsheet for groceries. Yet somehow, there's unlimited funds for rooftop drinks with the new girl. Babe, if a man is itemizing your paper towels but ballin' out on somebody else, the money was never tight. You were just not on the list of things he felt like paying for. But okay, the part that had me gasping out loud. He didn't hide her. He hid her, as in the real girlfriend. Went around telling everybody she packed up and moved out while she's at home in his hoodie washing his nasty gym clothes. I cannot. She's grieving a relationship that the whole friend group already buried months ago and nobody even told her there was a funeral. So here's where I land, babes. A man who can smile at you, sleep next to you, and tell the entire world you're gone all at the same time is just a really good liar who happened to know your coffee order. And the scary thing is, they never look crazy. They look normal. Sweet, even. So somebody tell me, would you have called the friend first like she did, or would you already be in the car? Because I'm not gonna lie, I'd be doing 80 to that rooftop bar. Update 1. Okay, so wow. First of all, you guys are insane in the best way possible. The comments on my last post had me cackling at 3 in the morning. Someone said Keith has the audacity of a man who's never been caught at anything, and honestly, that's the most accurate description of him I've ever heard. But yeah, you all wanted to know what I did, so here it is. Backing up to that Saturday morning, March 22nd. I was sitting at the kitchen table after getting off the phone with Tabitha, and my brain was doing that thing where you're so angry you actually get calm. Not peaceful calm. More like I am going to be very precise about this calm, because Keith would be home in a few hours and I already knew exactly how he was going to play it. He'd come in with food, probably Chick-fil-A because he always brings me food when he's guilty about something, even though he doesn't realize he does that, and he'd act normal and wait to see if I brought up the screenshot, and if I did, he'd hit me with the same colleague's sister line and make me feel stupid for pushing it. I wasn't going to give him the chance. Here's what I did. I went through my texts with Keith from every Friday night going back to January. Every single text where he told me he was at work late, staying for the project, grabbing food with the team after. I screenshot all of them. Then I went to Tabitha's Instagram and screenshot every single Friday night story she'd posted over the same period. Tabitha posts everything. Like that girl documents her entire life on stories. It's actually kind of a running joke. So I had proof from her posts that the group, including Keith, was out at bars, restaurants, bowling, someone's apartment for game night. All on the same Friday nights Keith told me he was working late. Then I wrote it all out. Dates, what Keith told me he was doing, what Tabitha's stories showed he was actually doing. I'm talking a full side-by-side comparison. January 10th, told me late meeting. Tabitha's story showed the whole group at some wings place with Keith and Brianna sharing a booth. January 24th, told me end of sprint review. Tabitha's story showed everyone at Vince's apartment playing cards, and there's Keith in the background with Brianna sitting on his lap. February 7th, told me his boss wanted extra hours. Tabitha posted a boomerang of the group doing shots, and Keith has his face buried in Brianna's neck. I went through 12 Fridays worth of this. Now here's the part where I maybe went further than I should have. And you know what? No, I'm not going to qualify it. I'm not sorry. I knew Keith's work email format because I'd sent him something to print once. First initial, last name at the company domain. I also knew his boss's name was Sean because Keith complained about him constantly. Same email format. And I knew there was already tension between Keith and Sean, that Keith was already on thin ice for calling out too many Mondays. I sent Sean an email. For my personal email, with my full name, not hiding behind anything. I told him that I was Keith's girlfriend and that I had reason to believe Keith had not been working late on Fridays as he'd been claiming. I attached the side-by-side document. Every Friday, what Keith told me versus what was documented on social media. I said I wasn't trying to cause problems at his company, but I thought he should know his employee was misrepresenting his hours. That's it. That's all I said. I didn't call Keith names. I didn't write some emotional letter. I kept it factual and short. Was it petty? Yeah. Was it also completely true? Also, yeah. I sent it Saturday afternoon and then I waited. Keith came home around 1 that day, and you guys called it, he brought Chick-fil-A, walked in with the bag like everything was normal, set it on the counter, asked me what I was watching. I told him I wasn't hungry. He shrugged and started eating. He didn't bring up the screenshot. Didn't mention it at all. Just sat there eating his sandwich watching some car show on YouTube on his phone like he hadn't been cuddling another woman 14 hours ago. I let it go for the rest of the weekend. Not because I forgave anything, but because I knew what was coming Monday and I wanted to watch it happen. Plus, I needed to figure out my living situation because I was not staying in this duplex with him, but I also couldn't just leave that night. My name isn't on the lease. It's Keith's cousin Leonard's property, and Keith's name is the only one on the paperwork. I'd been paying half the rent directly to Keith through Venmo every month, but I had no legal claim to the place. So I needed a plan. Sunday night, I called my mom. I told her everything. The Fridays, the Instagram story, Brianna, all of it. My mom didn't even let me finish before she started going off. She brought up the body wash from back in February, the coconut vanilla one. She told me she knew something was wrong that day and she should have said more. She was mad at herself about it, which made me feel guilty for not listening to her instincts in the first place. She asked me if I had somewhere to go, and I told her I was working on it. She said I could come home to Selena anytime, but my job is in Wichita, and I wasn't about to let Keith's mess derail my income too. Then she told my dad. I specifically asked her not to. I told her I was handling it, I had a plan, I didn't need Dad showing up making it worse. She said she understood. And then she told him anyway because of course she did. That's just my parents. They don't keep things from each other. And honestly, I get it, but the timing could not have been worse. My dad Ray called me Monday morning before I even got to work. He didn't yell or anything. He was doing that thing where he talks really slow and deliberate, asking me specific questions like a man building a case. He asked me when exactly Keith started lying. He asked me if Keith had ever gotten physical. He asked me where Leonard lived. He asked me how much money I'd paid in rent to Keith over the past year. Each question was more intense than the last, and I could tell he was working himself up even though he was trying to stay controlled. I told him everything was handled and please do not come to Wichita. He said okay. He did not mean okay. Monday at work, I couldn't focus on anything. I kept checking my phone, expecting either Keith or Sean's name to pop up. Nothing all morning, nothing through lunch. I was starting to think maybe Sean didn't check his email over the weekend. Maybe it went to spam. Maybe I miscalculated. By 3 o'clock, I'd almost convinced myself nothing was going to happen. Then around 5:15, right when I was getting in my car in the parking lot, Keith called. I want you guys to understand something. Keith is not a yeller. In almost 2 years together, I had seen him raise his voice maybe twice, and both times it was at a video game. Keith's whole thing is being calm and collected and making you feel like the emotional one. That's his superpower. He stays level and you feel crazy for being upset. This was not that Keith. He was screaming. I could barely make out words at first. It was just volume and rage. I sat in my car with the engine off and let him go. He was saying something about HR, about a meeting, about how everyone in his office knew. I kept asking him what happened, tell me exactly what happened, because I wanted every detail. He finally strung together something coherent. He said Sean pulled him into a meeting at like 4 o'clock and there was an HR person there. Some guy, Keith didn't even know his name, and they asked Keith about his Friday hours. They had my email. They had the attachment. Sean apparently went through the timesheets and cross-referenced with the building's badge-out times and found that Keith had been badging out at 4:30 or 5 on most Fridays, not staying late like he'd claimed. The timesheet discrepancies went back to January. And oh, it got worse. Because while this meeting was happening, apparently the email or the information in it had already made the rounds in the office. Keith didn't know how, but he suspected Sean told someone or the HR guy mentioned it or something, because by the time he walked out of that meeting, people in the hallway were looking at him different. He said his direct team wouldn't make eye contact. He said one of his coworkers, some girl he sits near, actually smirked at him when he walked by her desk. Keith was losing his mind on the phone. He kept saying I had no right to contact his job. He kept saying, did I understand what I'd done? Did I understand he could get fired? He has rent due in 2 weeks. His truck payment is due. He doesn't have savings to cover this. He said I was F***seeking insane. He said no normal person does this. He asked me if I understood that I might have just destroyed his career over a picture. Over a picture. That's what he called it. A picture. I asked him if Brianna was at the meeting. He started talking faster, stumbling over his words, trying to redirect. He said, "This isn't about Brianna. This is about you going behind my back to my employer." I said, "No, Keith. This is about you lying to my face every Friday for 3 months and building a whole relationship with someone else while coming home to me like nothing was happening." He started to say something about how I didn't understand the full situation, and I cut him off. I told him I don't care about the full situation. I care about the part where you told everyone we broke up in December and I moved out. Did you tell Brianna that too? Does she know I'm still here? Does she know I'm still sleeping in your bed? He didn't answer that. Instead, he pivoted to logistics. He said I needed to come home so we could talk about this like adults. I told him I didn't need to do anything and I'd come home when I was ready. He said this was his apartment and I couldn't just avoid it. I said funny because you've been avoiding it every Friday for 3 months. I hung up on him. It felt incredible. Then I sat in the parking lot for probably 20 minutes just gripping the steering wheel because my hands were literally shaking. Not from being scared, but from adrenaline because I'd been holding all of that in since Saturday morning. I drove to my friend Lauren's place instead of the duplex. Lauren is the one person in Wichita I trust completely. We've been close since high school. She moved here about a year before I did. I showed up at her apartment and she took one look at me and asked if Keith finally did something stupid enough for me to leave. She never liked him. She'd never said it outright while we were together, but she'd made these little comments. Like when I'd mentioned something Keith said, she'd go, or she'd change the subject real quick. She told me that night she'd been waiting for this conversation for months. Lauren poured us both wine, and I sat on her kitchen floor because I was too wound up to sit on furniture like a normal person, and I told her everything. She did not give me gentle, supportive friend energy. She was mad, not at me, at the situation. She kept interrupting to say things like, "Are you kidding me? And he said that to you?" She asked me specifics about Brianna that I didn't know yet and then got annoyed at me for not knowing. She said I needed to find out everything about this girl, not to confront her, but because I deserved to know exactly how deep this went. Around 8 that night, Keith texted me 11 times. I'm not exaggerating, I counted. The messages went from, "Please come home, we need to talk to you, can't just blow up my life and disappear too. If you don't come back tonight, I'm changing the locks." That last one was funny to me because the locks are Leonard's property and Keith can't change them without Leonard's permission. Keith forgets things like that when he's panicking. I didn't respond to any of the texts. Lauren and I stayed up until almost 1 in the morning going through Tabitha's entire Instagram history story by story, post by post, finding every single appearance of Brianna in the background or the foreground of Keith's Friday life. We found 19 separate instances. 19 times Keith was documented out with this girl on nights he told me he was working. Lauren was keeping a tally on the back of an envelope. And then, okay, wait, this is the part that still makes my blood boil even writing it. Around midnight while we were doing this deep dive, Tabitha texted me. She said she'd talked to Vince and Vince was upset too because Keith had lied to him. Vince had no idea Keith still had a girlfriend at home. Vince felt used because he'd been vouching for Keith to Brianna's older brother, who apparently is protective of her. So now Vince is in a bad spot too because he essentially introduced and endorsed Keith to this girl's family under false pretenses. Tabitha said Vince told Keith they needed to talk, and Keith's response was to tell Vince to mind his own business, and that I was an ex who couldn't let go. An ex who couldn't let go. I'm lying on Lauren's kitchen floor reading this text from Tabitha, and Keith is still telling people I'm the problem. I'm the crazy ex. I'm the one who won't move on. This man is sleeping in a bed I helped pay for, wearing clothes I washed, eating food I bought, and telling his friend group I'm a stalker ex who can't accept it's over. Lauren grabbed my phone out of my hand and said, "Okay, that's enough for tonight. You need to sleep before you drive to wherever this man is and commit a felony." She was kidding. Mostly. Tuesday morning, I woke up on Lauren's couch and had 14 missed calls. 3 from Keith, 4 from my mom, 5 from my dad, 2 from a number I didn't recognize. I called my mom first because she'd kill me if I didn't. She was in full crisis mode. She told me my dad left for Wichita about an hour ago. I asked her why she told him after I specifically asked her not to, and she said, "Ray, I couldn't stop him. He was already putting his shoes on by the time I finished talking." My mom said my dad had called Keith directly. She didn't know what was said, but she knew it wasn't pleasant because my dad came back from the conversation and went straight to the garage for 10 minutes without speaking, which is what he does when he's trying not to say something he can't take back. Then apparently he slept on it and woke up Tuesday morning and said he was going to Wichita, and that was that. So now I had Keith imploding at work, Keith telling everyone I'm a delusional ex, Vince pissed at Keith, Tabitha feeding me information, Lauren ready to ride, my mom panicking, and my dad somewhere on the Kansas Turnpike heading toward Wichita to do God knows what. And I hadn't even dealt with Leonard yet. That's the part that's coming next, because when Leonard found out what Keith had been telling people, that I'd moved out, that we'd broken up, Leonard called me, not Keith. And what he told me about the rent situation made me want to scream, because it turns out I wasn't just being lied to as a girlfriend. Keith had been telling Leonard one thing about the rent and doing something completely different. And when I tell you the math wasn't mathing, you guys are going to lose it. Plus, I still haven't told you about Thursday. Thursday is when Keith brought Brianna to the duplex, while I was there, without warning. And what happened in that living room is honestly the part of this whole story that I replay in my head every single night, because that's when I finally saw who Keith really is, when he's completely cornered and out of moves. Update coming soon, I promise. I know I keep saying that, but there's so much and I'm trying to write it all out without losing the important parts. You guys are keeping me sane. Honestly, every time I second guess whether I went too far, I read the comments and remember that no, actually Keith went too far the day he decided one girlfriend wasn't enough. Stay tuned. Okay, so I keep seeing people go, oh, she went too far, and no. I'm sorry, but no. She didn't lie on him one time. The man did all of this himself. She just stopped being his little cover story. And honestly, the fact that the truth wrecked him this bad, that's not on her. That's on him for building his whole life on a lie that flimsy. I don't feel bad. I don't. Maybe that makes me a hater, but whatever. I read these stories every day, and the cheaters never deserve the soft treatment. And the thing that actually makes me laugh is how fast Mr. Calm fell apart. Girl, 2 years she never heard this man yell, and one true email turned him into a screaming mess in a parking lot. These quiet, I never get emotional, makes you feel crazy types are always the ones who completely lose it the second they're not winning anymore. The cool guy act is so fake and it cracks me up every time it falls apart. But okay, real talk. This is the part that gets my chest tight, because I've literally seen this happen to people I love. He's out here calling her the crazy ex while she's home washing his clothes and paying his bills. Do you know how insane that would make you feel? To be in your own home, in your own relationship, and find out everyone thinks you're some obsessed stalker girl he dumped months ago? I'd lose it. I would genuinely lose it. That messes with your head in a way that's hard to even explain. And the friends, Lord. They all knew. They all smiled along. They all let it happen until it got messy for them. Vince isn't sad she got cheated on. He's mad he looks dumb now. That's the part that stings the most, honestly, because it's so real. Half the people around you will watch you get made a fool of and stay quiet as long as it's not their problem yet. I hope she keeps Tabitha and drops the rest, because loyalty that only shows up when it's convenient was never really loyalty, and I've already learned that one the hard way. Final update. All right, y'all, last one. Buckle up, because Thursday happened and I've been waiting to write this part. So Tuesday. My dad showed up in Wichita around noon. I was at work and Lauren texted me that some older guy in a Silverado was parked outside the duplex, just sitting there. That was Ray. He'd driven straight there, parked in the shared driveway behind Keith's truck so Keith couldn't leave without asking him to move, and was just waiting. My dad is retired and has absolutely nothing better to do than sit in a truck being intimidating, and he knows it. I left work early and drove over. My dad was leaning against the tailgate drinking a gas station coffee like he was at a tailgate. I asked him what exactly his plan was. He told me his plan was to be present. Just present. He said he wasn't going to touch Keith or threaten Keith, but he wanted Keith to understand that when you mess with his daughter, you now have to deal with her father physically existing in your space. My dad is 6'2" and spent 30 years doing manual labor before he retired. His version of being present is a lot. Keith wasn't home yet. I used the time to start packing my things. My dad helped carry boxes to his truck and mine. While we were loading stuff, he asked me how much rent I'd been paying Keith every month. I told him $650. He asked me what the total rent was. I said I assumed $1,300 split in half. My dad just shook his head and said Leonard told him the total rent was $900. I stopped in the driveway holding a box of my books. $900. The rent on the entire duplex was $900. I'd been paying Keith $650 of it every month. Keith was paying $250 out of pocket and profiting off me living there. For almost a year. Leonard had told my dad because my dad called Leonard directly. They'd actually met once at a family cookout Keith dragged me to. And Leonard had no idea I was paying that much. Leonard said he'd given Keith the family discount specifically because Keith told him money was tight. Leonard was furious too. I did the math later. 11 months of paying $350 more than my half. That's $38.50 Keith just pocketed from me. And this man used to make me Venmo him $4.73 for a box of dryer sheets. Keith got home around 5:30. He pulled into the driveway and saw my dad's truck blocking him in, and just sat in his truck for a solid 3 minutes before he got out. My dad didn't move, didn't say anything. Just stood there by the tailgate watching Keith walk up like he was memorizing every step. Keith tried to go straight past us into the duplex. My dad stepped into the doorframe. Not aggressively, just stood there. Keith told him he didn't have to be here and this was between me and Keith. My dad told him no, it stopped being between you and her when you lied to her face for 3 months and took her money on top of it. Keith tried the laugh it off thing, tried to say the rent thing was a misunderstanding and he was going to pay me back. My dad didn't budge. He asked Keith if Brianna was a misunderstanding too. Keith's whole energy shifted. He stopped trying to be casual. He got loud. He told my dad he needed to leave his property. My dad reminded him it was Leonard's property and Leonard already knew everything. Keith looked at me and told me I'd ruined his life, that contacting his job was psychotic, that he was probably getting fired by Friday, and that I needed to get my stuff and get out. I told him I was already getting my stuff out, thanks for noticing. We loaded everything we could fit. My dad stayed between me and Keith the whole time, not because Keith was being physically threatening, but because my dad is my dad and that's what he does. Keith kept following us room to room trying to argue. He told me I was going to regret this, that I acted out of spite, that a normal person would have just broken up and moved on. I stopped in the hallway with an armful of my bathroom stuff and told him a normal person doesn't have a whole second girlfriend for 3 months. He said Brianna isn't what I think she is. I said, cool, I don't care what she is. I care that you told everyone I didn't exist. We got about 80% of my stuff out that night. My dad drove back to Selena with the overflow and I went to Lauren's. Keith texted me 4 times that night. Twice about things I'd supposedly taken that were his. A phone charger and a cast iron pan, both of which were literally mine. Once to tell me I was going to hear from Leonard about the lease situation. Once to say he still thought we could fix this if I stopped acting crazy. I responded to that last one. I told him the only thing I was fixing was my credit score since I wouldn't be splitting groceries with a man who charges his girlfriend markup on rent anymore. Wednesday was quiet. I went to work, came back to Lauren's, ate takeout on her couch, scrolled through comments on my first post. Lauren was already looking at apartment listings for me because she's that person. Thursday. I went back to the duplex after work to grab the rest of my things. I had maybe 2 more trips worth of stuff. Winter clothes in the closet, some kitchen things, a framed picture my grandma gave me that I was not leaving behind. I let myself in with the key I still had. Keith was sitting on the couch. Brianna was sitting next to him. I stood in the doorway for maybe 2 seconds before my brain caught up to my eyes. She was younger than I expected. Pretty, wearing one of Keith's flannels, and she looked absolutely terrified. Keith stood up immediately and started talking. He said Brianna deserved to hear my side because he'd been honest with her even if he wasn't honest with me. He said he brought her here so we could all clear the air. Clear the air. This man brought his side piece to the apartment I'd been paying rent on so we could clear the air. I looked at Brianna and asked her one question. I asked her when Keith told her about me. She looked at Keith. He started talking over her, saying that wasn't relevant, saying the point was to move forward. I told him to shut up. I wasn't asking him. I was asking her. When did he tell you about me? Brianna said Tuesday. 2 days ago. After everything blew up at work, after Vince confronted him, after my dad showed up, that's when he told her I existed. She'd had no idea for 3 months. She thought Keith was single. She thought he lived alone. She said she'd been to the duplex once in February when I was visiting my parents for the weekend, and Keith had hidden every single sign of me. My shampoo, my shoes by the door, the blanket my mom crocheted that was always on the couch. He'd stuffed it all somewhere before she came over. Brianna was shaking. She wasn't crying yet, but she was close. She looked at Keith and asked him why he brought her here for this. Keith started doing what Keith does, talking in circles, saying it was complicated, saying he cared about both of us in different ways, saying the situation got away from him. I watched him try to manage 2 women at the same time in real time, and it was honestly pathetic. He kept looking back and forth between us, trying to figure out which one of us he was losing faster. I told Brianna she could stay or go, but I wasn't having a conversation with Keith while he had an audience he was performing for. She stood up and told Keith she needed air. She walked out the front door. Keith started to follow her and I stepped into the hallway. I told him no. She can leave, but you're staying here because you owe me this conversation, not her. She's had you for 3 months. I've had 3 months of lies. Keith tried to push past me. I didn't move. He told me to get out of the way. I told him the only thing he was going to do right now was stand here and tell me why. Not the how. I already knew the how. The why. Why Brianna? Why the lying? Why not just break up with me if he wanted someone else? And you know what he said? He said he didn't want to lose the apartment. That's what it was. The cheap rent from Leonard was contingent on him being in a relationship because Leonard's rule for the family discount was that it was for family members who were building a life with someone, not for single guys who wanted a crash pad. Keith told Leonard we were serious, that we were talking about the future. That's why Leonard gave him the deal. If Keith broke up with me, he'd either have to lie to Leonard about it or lose the rent discount. So he kept me around for the housing and started a new relationship on the side. I asked him if any of it was real. He started making excuses again, saying of course it was real at some point, saying things just changed and he met Brianna and it happened. I asked him if he was going to tell me or if he was going to keep running both situations forever. He said he was figuring it out. I said no, you weren't. You were profiting off me and dating someone else, and the only person figuring anything out was me when I saw that Instagram story. I got my grandma's picture off the wall. I grabbed the last 2 bags of my clothes from the closet. Keith stood in the living room the entire time, not helping, not apologizing, not doing anything except looking at his phone, probably texting Brianna. I walked out, drove to Lauren's. My hands were steady the whole way. 2 days later, Leonard called Keith and told him the family discount was done. Full market rate starting next month. Keith's job put him on a formal performance improvement plan. Not fired yet, but 1 step away. Vince cut him off completely. Tabitha told me Brianna stopped responding to Keith's texts by the following weekend. I'm at Lauren's for now. Found a 1-bedroom about 15 minutes from work, moving in first of the month. My dad drove down again to help me move, and the first thing he did was install a deadbolt, which was unnecessary but very on brand for him. Keith texted me last week. Said he hoped I was happy with what I'd done. I told him I was. Because I am. I lost a man who was charging me rent markup while he dated someone else behind my back. I'll survive. Anyway, that's the whole thing. Sorry it took 3 posts to tell it, but I wanted you guys to have every detail because you earned it. And to the person who commented on my first post saying Keith sounds like the type of guy who uses your Netflix and then changes the password, you are so right, and yes, he did change the Netflix password, but joke's on him because it was my account and I just reset it. If you read all 3 parts, you're a certified real one. I'm going to go eat leftover Thai food on Lauren's couch and not think about Keith for the rest of the night. Peace. Okay, I need a second, because the rent thing has me up out of my seat. Forget the cheating for a sec. This man was running his own girlfriend like a little side business, charging her markup, pocketing her money every single month while making her send him $4 for dryer sheets like she owed him. Bestie. I have seen a lot of trash men in these stories, and this one might be the cheapest, most shameless little goblin I've ever come across. I'm actually mad. Like physically. And then the reason finally comes out, and it's not even love or lust or whatever, it's the discount. He kept her around so he wouldn't lose cheap rent. That's it. That's all she was to him. Not a girlfriend, not a person he loved, a walking lease requirement that also did his laundry and funded his life. Do you understand how dehumanizing that is? I would never recover. I'd have to move to a different state and change my name. And listen, I came in hot ready to drag Brianna, and I genuinely can't. That girl thought she had a single man who lived alone. He hid this woman's shampoo, her shoes, the blanket her mama crocheted, like she was a body he was stashing before company came. Both of these women got run over by the same pathetic little man, and neither one of them knew. And his big idea? Sit them on the same couch like he's hosting daytime TV. The delusion on this man could power a city. Oh, anyway, that's the story. Love you guys. See you in the next one.